guys. Today I wanted to talk about a language arts topic called analyzing plot elements. And so sometimes on the GED and in language arts, they might give you like a short story and they want you to look at the elements of the plot or the elements of the story. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And remember, analyzing just means like taking a deeper look at something and figuring out what it means, what's the significance of it, that type of thing. So all a plot is, it's just a series of events and how the characters face these events. And so this is the book definition of it, but basically the plot is just the actual story. It's the people in the story and it's how they deal with whatever problems come their way. So maybe there is a hole in the roof and that's the problem. It's how the characters deal with that. Or maybe it is something like the movie Batman, where, Batman's parents die and he has to eventually face the Joker. So how does he deal with the Joker? How does Batman go on to defeat the Joker and keep Gotham safe? So it's how these things happen and what those characters do when those things are happening to them. So there are these things called plot elements. And basically, plot elements are just pieces of the plot or pieces of the story. So in stories, there are characters. There's the people or the animals that the things in the story are happening to. And the first part of the story is what's called the exposition. And so the exposition is just the beginning of the story. It tells you who the characters are. It tells you where the story is happening or the setting. And it just gives you a glimpse of, what's going on. But then after the exposition happens, after you've been introduced to the characters and the setting, some kind of problem occurs. Something happens to the characters, and they have to overcome that problem. They have to fix it, or they have to learn from it. They have to figure out how to go on while that problem is happening. And so as that complication or as that problem goes on, that leads to what's called the climax of the story or the most intense part of the story. So for instance, in The Dark Knight, the climax is when Batman has to go into Gotham Tower and the Joker has all of these people kidnapped, and you don't know if the criminals on the boat are going to blow up the boat with the citizens, and you don't know if the citizens on the boat are going to blow up the boat with the criminals. So that's the climax of it. You don't know what's going to happen. It's sort of, the climax is sort of like the sitting on the edge of your seat part of the story or of the movie that you're watching. And so after the problem is sorted out, the last part of the story is what's called the resolution. It's the end of the story where the complications or the problems are resolved. So, spoiler alert, at the end of Dark Knight, it is when Harvey Dent is killed, and so not only has Batman stopped the Joker, but he has also stopped Harvey Dent or Two-Face from killing Commissioner Gordon's family, and so that's the resolution of it. Batman stopped the bad guys, everything is okay. So the resolution is just wherever the problems are resolved. So this thing right here is a graphic organizer of plot elements. So it's just, if you're a visual person, it's a good way to see these different elements of a story. So the first part down here is what's called the exposition. So remember, the exposition is the beginning. It's where we get introduced to the characters. It's where we figure out where the setting is happening, or where the story is happening, or what the setting is. So for instance, in The Dark Knight, the characters are, Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent and Rachel somebody whose name, Dawson? Can't remember her last name. But we are introduced to them. And then this conflict happens. What's the problem? Well, the Joker comes along, and the Joker's crazy. So the conflict is just the problem. And so the problem can be something like outside. It could be like a person that's a villain. It could be some like horrible event that's happened. Or the conflict could even be what's called an internal conflict. Maybe the character is struggling with something inside. Maybe they feel like a failure. Maybe they're having to deal with somebody's death. So conflicts can happen on the outside, external conflict, or they can be happening on the inside in the character's mind, or something to that effect. Maybe they're struggling with being good or being bad. And then there are these events that are leading up to the rising action. So there are these events that happen that are leading us to this climax. So going back to The Dark Knight, these events could be, there's a bank robbery with the Joker. Harvey Dent is kind of gaining in power as an attorney. And, Batman is having a hard time trying to fight these villains. And the Joker seems to be getting kind of crazier and crazier. And then all of these actions lead up to the climax. And so the climax in The Dark Knight was when, Harvey Dent has kidnapped Commissioner Gordon's family and you don't know what's going to happen. So, the boat kidnapping and the fight between, Batman and all these other villains, all of this stuff has led to this climax of this showdown between Two-Face and Batman as he's threatened Commissioner Gordon's family. And so, what happens that ends it? Well, so after this most exciting part, after the problem is resolved, that takes us to the falling action, or the So, how do they start to fix the conflict? So, Batman and Joker get into a fight. I'm trying to remember. He fights Two-Face. He defeats him. He saves Commissioner Gordon's family, and then Batman eventually rides. So the resolution, Batman rides off into the night. So Commissioner Gordon's family's okay. Joker's gone. Two-Face is dead, and Batman takes off because he thinks Gotham doesn't need him anymore. So here's an example of this for the story of Cinderella. Now, hopefully Cinderella is a story that all of us know. I kind of butchered my example of The Dark Knight. I apologize for that. It's been a little while since I've seen it. So if we were telling the story of Cinderella, this would be a good plot diagram of Cinderella. So the setting, or where this story happens, is in a kingdom a long time ago, or, once upon a time. And it doesn't list it here, but we also want to know who the characters are. So the characters are Cinderella, the fairy godmother, the evil stepmother, the evil stepsisters, and Prince Charming. So the exposition, or the beginning, introduces the characters and this problem. So Cinderella wants to go to the ball, but her stepmother wouldn't allow her to go, so her fairy godmother comes to help. So, her fairy godmother comes to help. But then, all of these events are leading up to, so what's the problem? She doesn't have a dress to wear to the ball. She can't go to the ball. She doesn't have a dress to wear to it. And so, her stepsisters go to the ball, but then a fairy godmother appears. They give Cinderella, the fairy godmother gives Cinderella clothes and a coach and a footman. And so it's leading up to all of these things. The problem was that, she didn't have a dress. Her godmother fixed that. She goes to the ball. She dances with the prince. Everything's great. They hit it off. But then the clock chimes that it's midnight. And so she has to run off and she loses her slipper. And so the prince is still in love with her. So he decides that he's going to take that glass slipper and take it around the kingdom to try to find who it fits, so that he could find this woman that he fell in love with at the ball. So all of these things are leading up to the climax. So all of these things are leading up to this will he, won't he find Cinderella? And he does. So the stepsisters try to force their feet into the slipper. It doesn't fit them, but it does fit Cinderella. So, if this wasn't such a well-known story, if we didn't know this, maybe we'd be sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, did he find her? Is he going to realize that it's actually Cinderella? And yeah, he does. And so after that happens, after he realizes it's Cinderella and the prince get married. This says that the stepsisters and the stepmother live at the palace with her. It depends on which version you read. I highly recommend you read the original, German Aschenputtel one, because it's really dark and creepy, but that's beside the point. So I don't remember ever seeing step number 10 in the falling action. But what's the resolution of it? What's the end of it? Oh, they live happily ever after. Everything's great. So they live happily ever after. They're wonderful. It's all good. That's the end of it. So let's look at this example. So I'm going to pause this and let you give you a chance to read this, and then we're going to talk about it. So pause the video, read this on your own, read this a few times if you have to, and then we will look at some questions about it. Okay, so you have read Aiden's Day at the Lake. And so what we're going to do, we are going to figure out what happens in these different elements of the plot, or in these different parts of the plot. So remember, the exposition is the beginning. So what is it that's happening at the beginning of the story? So Aiden's family, they go to the lake. And the big thing is that Aiden wants to learn to water ski. So he wants to learn how to water ski. I'm not writing all of this out just because I don't have the room to. But what's the rising action? What is it that's going to lead us to this problem, or to this most important part? So Aiden wants to learn to water ski. And so he wants to learn it, but he is first unsuccessful. He's not good at it at first. So he tries it, thinks he's going to be great the first time, but he isn't successful. He can't even get out of the water. And so he's trying, he's not very successful, but the climax is when he tries this a second time, and he does it a little bit. So he has a little bit of success, and he's really encouraged. So he partially does it, and he's encouraged. But then the falling action is that third attempt that he makes, and he does it. So he was successful. So he does it, he's successful, he skis for 2 minutes, he finally accomplished his goal. And then what's the resolution? How does this end? He can't wait to try it again. He wants to ski again. He was glad that he was successful, and he's like, hey, let's do this again sometime. Very good. All right, let's look at this last example together. So this is called Mr. Hale Goes to the House. Well, Mr. Hale, said the county attorney, tell just what happened when you came here yesterday morning. I didn't see or hear anything. I knocked at the door. I knocked again louder, and I thought I heard somebody say, come in. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet. But I opened the door, this door, jerking a hand toward the door by which the two women stood, and there in that rocker, pointing to it, sat Mrs. Wright. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, can't I see John? No, says she, kind of dull-like. Ain't he home? Says I. Then she looked at me. Yes, says she, he's home. Then why can't I see him? I asked her, out of patience with her now. 'Cause he's dead, says she, just as quiet and dull, and fell to pleating her apron. So what is this complication, or this problem, that Mr. Hale discovers at Mrs. Wright's house? Is it that he sees that Mrs. Wright is ill, or that she's sick? Is it that he learns that John is dead? No one can answer the door? Or is it that Mrs. Wright cannot speak? So which of those is the problem or the complication in this story? Right, it is B. She learns that John is dead. So he wants to see him. Like, can I see him? Can I talk to Mr. Hale? Can I see him? No, you can't. He's home, but he's dead. So that is the problem there. So it's not that nobody answers the door. It's not that Mrs. Wright can't speak, because she can. She does talk to him. And it's not that Mrs. Wright is ill, because that doesn't even happen in here. It's that he learns that John is dead. And so this is really short. There's a longer story that goes to it. It's pretty good, actually. But the problem is, oh my goodness, John is dead. He wasn't expecting that. That's the problem. He's going to have to solve something there. So that is it about plot elements. So just like always, if you don't have access to the Google Classroom, be sure to email us or Facebook message us to request access. So once you've watched this, go into the Google Classroom and take the plot elements self-check. Test your knowledge on this, make sure you understood it. And yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to email us, to contact us, and we are here to serve you. So have a great day.